Welcome to Sage 500 ERP Data Import Manager training. The Data Import Manager module allows repetitive import of data for predefined Sage 500 ERP entities, such as invoices and sales orders, into Sage 500 ERP in compliance with the Sage 500 business rules. Among many ERP entities, you can insert the most popular, such as pending accounts receivable invoices, accounts payable vouchers, open sales orders, and pending general ledger transactions into Sage 500 destination tables. You can also update some columns for existing customers, vendor item price list, and sales orders. This presentation will cover the following Sage 500 Data Import Manager topics. Maintain source connection to define the connection and source tables from the source data to the Sage 500 databases, and creation or maintenance of the import job with the steps needed for mapping source tables and columns to the Sage 500 staging tables and columns. There are three major data import manager tasks: maintain source connection, maintain import job, and process import job. Use maintain source connection task to define the connection and source tables from the source data to the Sage 500 database. The connection is used at runtime to connect to the data source and import the data into Sage 500 tables. Other tasks within Data Import Manager, such as maintain import job and process import job, also reference the source connection ID. In the Maintain Source Connection window, at the Source Connection field, type the data source name. At the Description field, type a description for the source connection. At the Type field, make a selection. Depending on the type of data source type selected, enter the appropriate fields on the enabled tabs. For example, for a SQL Server type of connection, you would enter the server name to be used in the source data connection and select whether to use Windows NT Security or a specific username and password on the server tab. And for SQL data type, to test the server connection, you can click on Test Connection. Supported data source types are flat text file, SQL Server, Microsoft Access, Microsoft Excel, XML or Extensible Markup Language, .xml but can have other extensions, and multi-format text files. For all source data types except flat text files, you can select the available tables from the available list on the Tables tab to the selected list. This allows you to further define the import job definition and mapping of the selected tables and columns in the Maintain Import Job window. You can view the data source table in the preview section of the window. The preview grid lists the first 100 records of the data source file or highlighted table. So the preview grid displays a file or a table with the column headings, if available, as the first row of the grid. Click Preview to display the formatting of the source file. For text and Excel files, if you select the column names in first row checkbox and click Preview again, the fields in the first row move to the grid column headings. Within the File tab, there are three fields that become enabled depending on the source type. For the source file, enter the file to be used as the data source for this connection. For the archive folder, enter the folder into which the imported data source files will be moved after they are processed by an import job. Archived files are removed from processing. If an archive folder is not specified, the source files will not be archived and will remain in the original location. In the sample file field, enter the file to be displayed in the preview grid. This file is also used in maintain import job to create table and column definitions for this connection. The data in the file is only representative of the processing file and is not used in the import job unless it is in the processing folder. Only up to 100 first rows display in preview grid. You can check column names in first row option to move the fields in the first row to the grid column headings. This field is available only if Excel or flat text file is selected at the type field. To create or maintain import job definition in Data Import Manager, use the following procedure. In the Maintain Import Job window, enter the Import Job field or click the Navigator button to list all existing import job definitions. At the description field, type a description for the job import. At the source connection field, select a data source that was defined in maintain source connection. At the destination entity field, select a destination entity. The associated staging tables display in the table mapping grid. The destination entity represents the location that the fields are going into. You can click the lookup button for a list of all the available destination entities. Table mapping grid displays which source tables to map to each staging table for the entity. The highlighted table also displays in the available list below the grid. You can then use the arrow buttons to move the tables for which the Map Table checkbox is selected to the selected list. Select Map Table checkbox to indicate which staging tables should be mapped in this job definition. Clear the checkbox if you don't want to indicate which staging tables should be mapped for this job definition. Map the staging tables and columns using the appropriate mapping type. In the grid on the Table Mapping tab, select the staging table to be mapped. The source tables associated with the staging table appear in the available list. Move the source table that contain data needed for the selected staging table from the available list to the selected list. If there is more than one source table with a parent-child relationship in the select list, click Relationship to define data for proper interpretation during the import job execution process. Validations occur at the time of the job execution. Notice that relationships cannot be established between more than two tables. Use the Column Mapping tab to determine how columns are mapped between the staging and source files. Here are the basic steps for mapping a column in Data Import Manager. Click the Column Mapping tab and map all the staging tables. Note that the selected staging table names appear in the staging table drop-down list. At the Mapping Type field, select the appropriate mapping type for the column. Click the Stage Value field or press Tab key to invoke the corresponding mapping window. Please note that those steps must be performed for each staging table. And here is the explanation for each column. Stage column, this field displays the name of the staging table column being mapped. Stage type, this field displays the data type of the staging table column. Required, this checkbox is to indicate that the data is required in Sage 500 permanent table column. Allow update checkbox is to allow Sage 500 table column to be updated. This checkbox is available only for entities that allow updates based on Sage 500 metadata. And mapping type, this field is used during the extraction of the data from the source into the selected staging table column, and also only for certain fields identified in the metadata. When you click on Stage Value field, Column Mapping Details window will pop up. This field displays the source data that will be placed into the staging column. This value depends on the mapping type, source table column, static value, etc. At the bottom of column mapping tab, there are three fields. Description, this field displays the description of the Sage 500 destination column corresponding to the staging column selected in the grid. Permanent table displays Sage 500 destination table, which contains the column selected for mapping and into which the source data will be imported. And permanent column displays Sage 500 destination column into which the source data will be imported. After you have defined all the details of your import job, proceed with saving. In this session, you have learned how to create a new Data Import Manager source connection and import job. Thank you for watching.